Hello and welcome to the first tutorial. In this tutorial, I will explain the first exercise and recommend tools and plugins for you to use. First, to open and solve the exercise file, you must have Rhino installed on your computer. I assume many of you have already installed or used Rhino before, therefore I won't be explaining how to install it in this video. But for those who haven't done it before, I will put a PDF file on 12 to explain how to. We will be working with Rhino 7 and of course Grasshopper extension comes automatically with it. In this tutorial, I will be giving some basic information about the tools you may use in this exercise. When you finish the first exercise and upload your results, you will have access to a new tutorial for exercise 2, as well as my solution for exercise 1. I don't expect you to find the exact same solution I did, as Grasshopper is completely open to different tools and approaches. You are free to come up with any solution to reach the desired goal. The main purpose of this exercise is to receive, create, and modify a set of data and manipulate the data to your desired parameters. So let's get started. In the first exercise, I have created a tool that creates a graphical representation of a building with a window. You can play with the parameters I have created to get the form to your desired liking. In this exercise, the only relevant parameter is the open factor, which is at the bottom. This parameter changes the open factor of the blinds between 0 to 1, which 0 means fully open and 1 means fully closed. The task is to create a minimum of 2 different scenarios irrelevant to each other to change the open factor. For example, I have decided to go with 3 scenarios which are based on sun angle, exterior temperature and interior temperature. In the first task, you don't have to concern yourself with how 3 of them influences each other. Each scenario must be for itself. But please think about what comes in exercise 2, which you have to combine these scenarios into one to influence each other. That's why I suggest you pick more than 2 parameters that would actually kind of make sense to go together. Now, to demonstrate how it actually works, I have created an example. So in my scenario, in this case, I'm going to be using the sun angle, which is actually a parameter that I created, so it doesn't based on any real data. It's just to simulate my algorithm and see how it works and how I manipulate it. So to explain you further what the sun angle means here, in this case, let's imagine I have a very nice building here, and when the sun is at the top, let's say at 12 and noon, I have it by the 0 degrees that makes with my facade here. And then the fully down sun is 90 degrees. Of course, you can decide to start from the left side and say that's the 0, then you can go 90 at noon and 180 at the sunset. But it's up to you how to build it. It's going to be the same result, whatever. So for example, in case I have 45 degrees, which means I get the sun angle from this direction. Of course, this is a very simple 2D diagram and a very simple algorithm, but with the correct data, I can still use the same algorithm to get the desired result. Only the data here right now is made up. So I decided my sun angle here should control my blinds, and when it reaches 10 degrees, it should start slowly to close, and when it reaches the 90 degrees, it's fully closed. And in between, I want it to gradually close, so I prevent the sunlight to come inside my room. So beyond 90 would be, in my scenario, night time. Therefore, I won't be needing the blinds, so the blinds will go open automatically. So let's start moving the sun angle, and as you see, nothing happens until I reach 10. And after I reach 10, it starts to close down, as you see. And I can move it further, and when I reach the 90 degrees approximately, it's almost fully closed, and at the 90 it's going to be fully closed. Like I said, past 90 I won't be needing it closed, so it opens up like again. Now, like I mentioned earlier, here you can change any parameters to make the building to your liking. You can make it wider, you can change the amount of windows in X position or Y position, doesn't matter, or Z position. So when I look at the perspective, yeah, you have something like this, and then you can play with the window position like this here. Of course, something that makes sense. If you go too further, then of course it breaks, but yeah, with this you control the bottom corner of your window, as well as you can change the glass size, glass height, but none of these should matter to your progress. These are just for graphical play. What important for us is the open factor, which normally you can change from 0 to 1 like this, but we want to create an algorithm that takes these numbers that I used for the sun angle between 0 to 90 and turn them into actual numbers between 0 to 1. So I can change my open factor, and I'm going to be mentioning in this tutorial what kind of tools you can use to reach set of data similar to that. Now to start over, I will explain which path to follow, and I will be showing some tools and tips on the way. So first of all, I created the script to fit with centimeters, because the grasshopper doesn't have its units, so it has just numbers, and for it to like work nicely on Rhino, that the tools that I built should function properly, it should be in centimeters. So I go to file, and I can say here new, and then I can select here large object centimeters. I say open, and it opens up a fresh file. I suggest using the perspective view. You can also use the front view, top view, however you prefer. I would say the front view is the best for presentation because it sees the blinds the best. Now to open the grasshopper, either you can type in grasshopper. As you see on the top left corner, you have the command section where you can type in all the commands, or you can come here and click on launch grasshopper. Now it opens up, and to keep in mind, this is a separate window, but it works the same with Rhino, so none of them could go front or back, so you cannot take the Rhino front. But I usually go by placing it on the left and placing grasshopper on the right, so I can see both of them at the same time. So here on the right side of grasshopper, this is going to be like a very fast crash course. You can set this visibility, how it shows up in Rhino environment. So if I created a box by 2 points, let's say, let's get some points. I have 1 point here, and then I want to make it higher by 100. I don't know, doesn't matter. That, and then move this also in Y and X, or otherwise the best way to actually put a construct point node Like I said, this is just to demonstrate the graphics. You don't have to follow this part. So I'm just going to create a point like that. Yes. So I have a box here, and this box is visually red. So when I click on the node, it's going to turn green, which means it's selected. The same goes for the points. As you see, there is a small X on the corners that I placed my points at. If I click the point, it's going to select that point. You see, this point actually created a Rhino object, which I can now move in Rhino environment. But the second one is a virtual point that I cannot edit in the Rhino environment. So the dots on the left side of your tools are inputs, and the ones on the right side are the outputs. In this case, it always goes from left to right, and to remind you, you cannot actually put the output back to the input and create a circle reference. It's not possible. So the loop function doesn't work here. But as you see, when you have something like a slider which doesn't have any input part, but it has its output, because the input is actually itself. So you can define here certain numbers. Under the params tab on Grasshopper, under input, you can see different kinds of input options. You can get a Boolean toggle, for example. This is to define false or true by double clicking it. You can get a number slider as we had before. You can get a control knob like this. For example, you can rotate into loops, and you get a digit scroller like this. And there you can experiment with those, but these are the ones that are generic input stuff. Other than that, there is also MD slider and value list and button. You can experiment with them however you want. Now, when it comes to the outputs, you always get a certain type of data. So for example, point is a point data. So when you go to the params tab under geometry, you can see that a point is defined as point, then you have a vector, you have circle, curve, and such. You have BREP, so boundary representations. These are also 3D objects, similar to meshes. Meshes are 2D faces that contains polygons, and you can create also 3D forms out of meshes, but BREP actually has everything included. So then you have a surface also, which is very similar to mesh, and you have sub-D, which is a subdivided surface tool that's actually on its own field. But for now, for us, the geometry doesn't contain much importance. For us, what's important is the mathematics and the algorithms in this course, because we want to mess with the data. So as you have seen, I have created a number slider by just double clicking, which opens up the search tab. You can type in here anything, even though you don't know the name of the command in Grasshopper. You can say, okay, I want to have a I don't know, cylinder. So you can start typing cylinder like this. I forgot how to write cylinder. Perfect. Cylinder. Yeah. And you see there is this cylinder here, and then it also gives you other options to create with the similar tools. Now of course, the more it goes, it kind of becomes unrelated at the top, but the bottom three always gives you something close. If I type in point, okay, I get the point, and there's a get point list, points of numbers. There will be lots of things with the point. So if you want something more specific, you can start typing in more specific, like for example, construct is a word that Grasshopper uses a lot. So when you type in construct, it gives you lots of construct options. Then you see here the point. But for example, I can say construct rectangle. Do you have something like that? So even though the tool doesn't actually name itself as construct rectangle, it's a tool that you use to create a rectangle. So therefore it gives you that option first, so it kind of understands what you want. Or you can say construct a domain, which we are going to learn what domain is. So that's how the search bar works, how to search some tools. And there is also shortcuts. So for example, if you double click and if you type in double slash, then it gives you a panel. If you put for example quotation mark, then it also gets you the panel. So you can press enter then on your keyboard and you have your panel, which is what we use for typing stuff. Or if you want, you can use it to get the output information, to see what actually it is, see its property. So when I put here a point, of course I get the coordinates, because the point consists of actually 3 coordinates for us right now. Other than that, to get a certain number, you can type in here like 15, and it would give you a number slider between 0 to 100 without any decimals. You can right click or double click and you can edit the slider. Like when you right click on it, there is the edit part, and then here you can also round it up, say okay, please put some decimals of 0 decimal, 1 decimal, 2, 3, or you can make it like a normal number that's without any decimals. You can change the properties mathematically also. And here you can define the maximum and minimum values, just to show you how the system works. If you put something between 0 to 10, let's say 5, the maximum value would be 10. If you put something like 101, which is larger than 101, it would be maximum of 1000. So as it's quite clear, when you put something between 0 or something to well, in this case, yes, 0 to 10 or 100 or 1000, then you would get the next value of the tenfold as your maximum value. So if I put something between 0 to 100, then it would give me a maximum of 100. Between 0 to 1000 to get, I should give something between 100 to 1000. I hope it was clear. Then there's another method. You can also define exactly what distance you want. You can say 50 smaller than 300 and enter, and your minimum value would be 50 and your maximum value would be 300. Same goes also for decimals. I can say please 0.000 and enter, which is 0.000 is the minimum, the maximum is 1.000. In the middle I will get the decimals. And when you go to edit, I can see it set up decimals to 3. Now I want to go a little bit more into the mathematical uses in Grasshopper. So on the top side, you have, next to the params, you have the maths tab. Here underneath you have some tools. First the domain, then first you have the matrix, you have the operators and polynomials and such. So of course in our cases we are not going to go into too complex formulas or too complex maths. It's in architectural field of course used for certain things, but many of the daily cases we don't need a top-notch mathematical formulas. So when you click on the operators, you get the basic mathematical operations like addition, multiplication, division, that would make negative, or subtraction. You can get those directly, and you can also get absolute values, you can get the factorials, you can get the integer divisions and such. Apart from that, we have the logical conditions, which for this course is the most important part, because these are like if conditions. So if I select here the larger than component, I can set a number, let's say 101, so we have a larger range. I put it as the first number, and as the second number I set here 200. I can double click and I can say set number, and I can type in 200, or I can copy paste by Ctrl C Ctrl V this node. I put it on the second number and I give here like 221 something. So now I am going to create a panel and to check what I'm getting from those. I can also hover over them to see what's going on. Let's say I put the larger than to my panel, so it gives me the false. What does it mean? It looks for the condition if the first number is larger than the second number. Is it correct? No, it's false. So if I change it over 200, now it turns to true, because this value, the first number, is larger than the second number. Or I can use the or equal to, which in this case, if I put here exactly 221, still stays as true. If I use the larger than, it would be false. So these are to set my boundaries. I can also say, okay, please also give me smaller than. And then I put my value to first number again, and for the second number I'm going to put 98, let's say. And let's get another panel. So in this case, when I make it lower, this becomes true. When I make it larger, this becomes true. When I set it in between, so in between of 98 and 221, so let's say 100, now both of them are false because it's larger than 98, so this condition is not okay, and then it's smaller than 221, so I get false, false. Now about the true false conditions, there is one catch, because the false actually is, in computer language also, means 0. False equals 0 and true is equal to 1. Not any other number, only 0 and 1. And this actually is very useful because we can use it to create conditions. We can use it to use numbers as multiplication, for example. Let's say if I want both of them to be true, so, or one of them, I want them to work when both of them are true, let's say, and I don't want it to work if one of them is false. So what I can do is I can create a multiplication, and I put the larger than and smaller than tabs. So right now I have my larger than as false, which is 0, and I have my smaller than, which is false. So how can I make that? Because if I make it lower, the smaller than works, so it's actually need to be other way around. Let's lower this. So if I have something like this in between both of them, my smaller than is true and my larger than is also true. So when both of them are true, which means 1 and 1, then I get my result as 1. If one of them would be wrong, for example, if it's larger than 80, but actually larger than 264 as well. When one of them is 0, then both of them will be 0. So in this case, what I did, I said only give me the correct result, only give me the value if both of them agrees, both conditions agree. So what does it mean? I can, let's say, use this number 260, 257, whatever, and I say please multiply. Oops, sorry. I put this to the A and I put this to B. So then my result is 257. So any value between 80 to 264 would work. But when I go below 80, then it's going to be 0. When I go above 80, so above 264, it's going to be 0. Only works in between. So with this, I can create now numbers that I want. And as you remember, in our open factor condition, I wanted the numbers to go from 0 to 1. And as you can imagine now, sometimes I want my blinds to be completely closed, like at the 1 level, so it's like 90 degrees, or in some many cases like from 90 to 10 degrees, like going from the 360 circle, I want it to be 0. So for that, I can eliminate the values that are irrelevant to me as 0, and then I can only use the ones between 10 to 90. So you can actually use a similar condition like this in your task. Delete this. Another thing actually is the domain part. So to explain the domain, I'm just going to create one. Construct domain we can use. Let's get this, and then let's get actually the domain itself. So I can double click and type in domain like this, and deconstruct domain like this. So what a domain is, the numbers in between. It's pretty clear. So when you think about that, when I have a start point, let's say my starting point is 10, and then I have my end point 50. So if I start a domain from 10 and end the domain at 50, I would get something called domain. So 10 to 50. It's exactly written like that. You can also create by typing it in. So I can type here 10 to 50, not enter, just click outside and combine it, and you get 10 to 50. Then here I can say please 10 to 60, and it changes the domain. Now also we can deconstruct the domain and get its value. So my start is 10, my end is 50. That would actually be a good way to get your max and minimum values. Now another thing is the range. So when I click on domain, here I have the bounds. So I can put certain set of numbers. Let's give you an example. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I make a multi-line data, so they are all separate values. And I put this on the numbers. And I get a domain 1 to 10, because my minimum number is 1 and my maximum number is 10. So I can change the 10 to 101, and I can change the 1 to 0. and my domain is 0 to 101. And as you see, it doesn't matter what I have in between. For me, what's important is my minimum value and my maximum value. Now that is the bounds. Another thing is the range, and which I don't see here. So I double click and type in range, which is this parameter. Now I can put my domain here, and I put my range here to see what's going on. Okay, we have multiple values. I think that's the reason. So just flatten this list. Because I guess I made it a multi-line data. Now it has to be a multi-line data. Okay, so here when I get the domain, not flatten this, I get the steps of how it should divide itself. So I'm right now dividing it in a way that it's divided to 10. It sort of takes each of them individually in itself, which is not a common way it acts, but yeah, let's say this is exactly actually what we want, this last one. So it's between 0 to 101, and it divides it equally. Because yeah, here I need a domain. Instead I just use a set of numbers, so I actually need to use the domain. Yeah, now this makes sense, my mistake. Here I have from 0 to 101 because these are my numbers and I get the maximum and minimum values. Now I divide it into steps, so it's 10 steps. So in 10 steps from 0 I reach to 101, so it divides it equally. So here I can type in another number. Instead of 10 I can say please 15. Then I divide it into 15 equal pieces. Here I can say your last number is actually 21, and from 0 to 21 I get equally divided numbers. Now understanding the domains are important because there is another tool that I like to mention, which is remap numbers. Now remap numbers is actually a very nice tool that you can manipulate the domain into what you want it to behave. So let's say I have here a domain that's from 0 to 10. Let's add also 1. That's my domain, 0 to 10, and I want to put this onto my source. Now from here I also want to get a number. Let's say I want the fourth number. That's 4. I put this onto the value. Now as you see, I have things from 0 to 10, and my source is a domain that the stuff comes from 0 to 10. Now I want to put this panel here to see the results. So I get right now 0 to 4. What's the reason? Because 0.4, sorry. Because my target here, if you see, default value is 0 to 1. So what it did, it took the 0 to 10 values and turned it into 0 to 1. But here it doesn't, it's okay, very simple example because the 4 will be 0.4. It's the same, only the decimals change. But here I can say very simple thing, like very random numbers, 25 to 5232, whatever. And I put this as my target and I get the exact value, that equivalent of 4 in 0 to 10. So it actually gets the exact distance if you divide a line. So for example, I have here a line that goes from 0 to 10, And then I have here another line that goes from 25 to, I don't know, 5,000. Let's say 500, it's hard to draw with the mouse. And if I take 4 here, it gives me the value exactly here, what's equivalent in this line when it's divided into equal pieces. So that's how the remap numbers work. And a quick tip that how you can use this actually in your task, as we experienced before, we can set a certain number and eliminate the certain set of numbers, like smaller than this and larger than this, and in the middle what stays, we can map them to be in between to 0 to 1. That's what I want for my open factor. So that's how you can actually change the numbers, the angles that you have, to gradually change into 0 to 1 degrees. So let's create a domain saying 0 to 1 and put this here, and as the value I'm going to set, let's say 0.00, and put this to value. As my source, 0 to 10 is fine. I can keep it that way for now. So when I move my slider, as you see, I get the exact values between 0 to 1. So in my case, of course, is 0 to 10, and I go to from 0 to 1, to which my maximum is supposed to be 1, but it's actually changing because my domain, actually here what I used, is 0 to 1. I don't know if that makes sense, but my max value should be actually 10 here. I can make it 10, so it goes from 0 to 10 actually. Now I can move it further, and I say, okay, 8.59 is equal 0.859 in my 0 to 1 panel. So when I reach 10, it becomes 1. When I reach 0, then it becomes 0, and in between I get the values that I want. So here what's important is that you give the numbers that you want as the domain itself. So if I'm working in between 0 to 300 degrees, then I should put my domain as 0 to 360, so I can get the values that I desire. So to sum it up all and give some recommendations also, what we did was to use some mathematical conditions, mathematical formulas and logical formulas like larger than, smaller than, or you can use equal to as well. You can create algorithms to get your desired values from set of values that you created yourself or you get from somewhere else. Now here I will have some recommendations that you can use in later phases. They are, for this task, none of them are relevant, but for later on you might need, especially to export your data or present it, or when you are working with set of lists, it's easy to sort them out. The first one would be the lunchbox, and the most useful one in this case, and I definitely recommend getting lunchbox anyways. Here you have lots of graphical tools like panels or math functions to get certain set of geometrical elements. You also get data types, like you can create CSV files, you can create charts, you can create data grids automatically that you can also download as PNGs. And then you also get the workflow part where you can read and write Excel files, which we are going to see an example in later exercises. And then I suggest the human also, which has lots of useful tools, lots of useful plugins inside. But the thing is that I use most is the item selector, which when I connect it to a list, I can select the values. If I make a random list, so here I can select whatever value I want to get. I want 10 values, let's say. Here I can select which one to get, and then I can work on it. So what can it do? For example, if you have created in a way that you have a list for of months, of days, of I don't know, time slots, you can have it as a list and you can select here, or you can also select the minimum maximum values or whatever. And this is the one that I use most, but please feel free to explore what other tools are. Now we have Meta Hopper, which is a tool, a plugin that I discovered recently, which has really good tools. But I suggest getting this because I've used one of its tools in the exercise template. So it's the group toggle. So when you place this into a group, you can turn it on and off the whole group preview at once. Other than that, we have also here some other tools that would be useful in more advanced settings when you set the group properties or panel properties most graphically. And lastly, there is the T toolbox, which I'm still experimenting in. That's to create actually Excel, so write to Excel files. It's quite a complicated story, unfortunately, when you try to write your data directly into Excel. It requires some setup earlier, but we are going to look into that together later on as well. So I wish you good luck and success in the first exercise, and see you in the second exercise again.